So, Bradwin, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But
Thank you, Doctor.
before we go into the future, can you quickly share a little bit of your own background? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up, my hometown is a township in Johannesburg called Eldorado Park. I spent a lot of my formative years there. Raised predominantly by my mom. My parents were divorced, so my mom had primary custody of us, as well as my late grandmother. My late grandmother was a Xhosa domestic worker. She was a phenomenal woman. But as they say, in these areas, it takes a village to raise a boy. So pretty much I'm a product of the township and of my family and the community. I have very fond memories growing up there. So that's my background, yeah.
And Bradwin, tell us, what was your dream career when you grew up?
When I grew up, ironically, I always wanted to be a pilot. I can recall so my dad was afforded the privilege of being able to fly for his job. And I remember every time he did that, we would go to the airport and we would go to the viewing lounge and watch the planes take off. And I was always fascinated by it. And I had a curiosity about how these machines worked and, how it is that a machine gets to take off and transport people across the globe. So I always wanted to be a pilot growing up. So that was my dream job.
And tell us, where did you start your career?
So my career started my family had a lot of businesses growing up. So actually,
Hello?
are you there?
Yes, yeah, sorry. I'm not sure what exactly, but obviously we lost connectivity.
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Sorry, you were saying where did you start your career? That's where we.
Okay. Yeah, so I started my career having graduated from the University of Cape Town as a chemical engineer, in the field as a practicing engineer working at their laundry factory out in Boksburg. So I practiced as a chemical engineer for many years. I then also moved into research and development across Africa, Middle East, and Turkey with Unilever, and then forayed into banking. And most recently, I find myself at First Grand, largely trying to be a bridge between business and IT. At the moment, I'm at the helm of F&B Connect, which is our telecommunications business inside the bank.
And tell us, Bradwin, you were heading up F&B in Lesotho. What was your best memory from the Mountain Kingdom?
There were so many fond memories in Lesotho. I think for me as a young CEO, trying to grapple with all of the complexities of running an end-to-end bank, I think was an exciting prospect for me. I'm always enamored by, situations that allow me to learn and grow, and expand my knowledge base. So that is actually a very fond memory of mine. But for me, the majesty of the kingdom was just an absolutely beautiful place for me. The hikes that I would go on, the swims in the dams, going up to Afri-ski and skiing in African snow. So I have incredibly fond memories of just the beautiful landscapes there. But I guess for me, my fondest, or the thing that I'm most proud of in Lesotho is, I'm not sure whether you would have seen, but Most recently, we announced my successor in Lesotho, Ms. Delekazi Mokebe, as a Black female CEO. So I could not be more proud, having worked with her and having, having her under my wing for the past few years and seeing her succeed me is, I think, the thing that gives me the most amount of pride and just so much hope for the future and so much hope for FNB Lesotho as well.
So Bradwin, who inspired you in your early days?
The incredible privilege of having amazing parents and amazing heroes, personal heroes in my life. My first inspiration was just my grandmother, my late grandmother, who had worked her way up from being a domestic worker to, just an incredibly humble person, spiritual person, a highly intelligent woman who would take the time to read to us. So she was, just my first personal hero. But I guess the two people that I live to make that I live and hope to make proud are just my parents. So I don't know if you know Kawasaki's book Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yes.
I have the privilege of being raised by such parents. My mom had an illustrious career in corporate South Africa and was the head of human capital at big multinationals. And my dad was an incredible pioneer as an entrepreneur, having done some real groundbreaking stuff. So, they shattered many ceilings that not many South Africans had been able to traverse. So, I've always been in training, and I've had the privilege of having amazing parents who taught my siblings and I to really just reach for the stars. I'm reminded of my favorite quote, which is a Walt Disney quote that reads, "If you can dream it, you can do it." And certainly my parents have lived that and inspired me to dream and to take action against those dreams.
Now, Bradwin, you were recently awarded the top 200 young leader from the Mail and Guardian. Can you tell us how this award came about?
So I suspect it was people in my organization who nominated me. But for me to be recognized by the Mail and Guardian Top 200 has been it's been a lifelong dream of mine. I've always looked up to that list and admired the recipients of, honorees on that list. So to be recognized as one of the top 200 young South Africans for that year is just an honor and a privilege that completely, I'm dumbfounded by it and completely overwhelmed by it. So I'm super humbled and grateful to those that nominated me, and I hope to live up to the name. So it's just been an incredibly overwhelming experience for me.
And Bradwin, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point or maybe a number of turning points?
For me, my career has been based on, one, trying to just be impactful in every opportunity that I've been given. So, for example, when I started my career in the Boksburg factory at Unilever, a lot of my friends were, got careers at head office in Umhlanga. And I remember feeling a little bit hard done by because I also wanted to be in the fancy head office building, and yet I was shipped off to the factory. But I made the best of that opportunity, and I tried to make sure that, I was always impactful regardless of the role that I was working in, be it a technical engineer working in a factory or a product head or a sales and growth head. So I've always strived for impact such that, when I'm in the room, that people would want me to opine on certain situations. And, such that when I'm not there, that, my presence is missed, but I also try to do so in a sustainable manner. So that's been my own personal career branding is, someone that strives to be an impactful player, but at the same time also, aiming for humility and just never forgetting, the fact that, I'm a humble kid from Eldorado Park. So also just, leveraging my empathy towards achieving some of my dreams.
Right. And Bradwin, tell us, What is driving you today?
You know, I'm inspired by, um, I guess what I'm, so I'm inspired by so many things happening around us. You know, we find ourselves in the middle of a global pandemic, and what I'm gravitating towards is how do I leverage my unearned privilege towards a purpose? And what do I mean by unearned privilege? You know, it is a privilege to be born a male in South Africa today. And it is a privilege that I've had the parents that I had who were able to, by the time that they needed to, afford me a very good education as an engineer. So how do I take some of these unearned privileges and just pay it forward towards something more purposeful and giving back to my community? So that's really what's inspiring me today. Um, and having FirstRand as a platform to be able to live my authentic self and channel that towards something meaningful, I think is an absolute dream of mine. So I'm incredibly blessed and lucky that I have the job that I have, working for an organization that I admire so much, and that allows me to be my authentic self.
Now, Bradwin, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does a
Yeah.
future of leadership mean to you?
Um, you know, I'm really inspired by, um, I guess, the different levels of leadership. And what I'm striving for is, you know, there's been this, the zeitgeist of the moment is about embracing one's authenticity, being one's authentic self. You know, so what I'm really striving for is I'm striving to be a leader that builds enduring greatness through this paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. So it's finding the balance between, you know, that impact player that I strive to be, but at the same time, just recognizing who I am, being my authentic self, and just being a beacon of hope to people that can look up and see themselves in me, and recognize that promise of Walt Disney that if you can dream it, you can do it. So I think, you know, that's one force that drives me. And then, like I said, at the moment, I think given what's going on, and this has been a personal mission of mine, not just in 2020, but for, you know, since I started my career, is really just channeling all of my unearned privilege towards a purpose. I feel it is a duty. I feel that I'm duty bound um, to take this privilege and to be able to be a platform and a beacon of hope for my community and for marginalized individuals. So these are the things that drive me today.
And Bradwin, looking back over your career, what are some of the lessons that you've learned that you would consider most important for building future leaders?
You know, I want to gravitate back to this word authenticity and, you know, having a high tolerance for failure. I think there's a lot of research that has been shared around, you know, organizations that have toleration, that have a tolerance for failure, and the proportionality between that and being innovative. So, you know, I try to be a leader that allows people the space to be authentic, that is a leader that allows people the space to make mistakes, provided that they are not perverse in nature. Um, and that hopefully we can learn and grow from those mistakes. So for me, nothing gives me more joy than seeing someone flourish and thrive and shine in their authentic self, you know, learning, growing, testing new things, looking for new ways of working so that they themselves can be that impact player that I think everyone strives to be. Um, so that for me has been, you know, my biggest learning point is how do I create those opportunities for people to be authentic and for people to want to make an impact in their everyday lives.
And Bradwin, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it you tell them about
Yeah.
social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brands?
You know, social media is an interesting platform. I think first and foremost, one has to recognize that as a leader, we have a responsibility to be authentic, but also that as a leader, one has the responsibility of making sure that what we say is not offensive to those that follow us. But at the same time, I think it's also important that we have to be a voice and we have to be a beacon of hope, especially in these dark times that we find ourselves in. So I try to use my social media platform to inspire people, to hopefully allow people to recognize that I'm also a human being. So I try to be a little bit quirky, especially on platforms like Instagram. You know, I think I allow myself a little bit more leverage to just show people that I'm a human being after all. Um, so I think this if used correctly, you know, it can give people an insight into who you are, how you think, and hopefully be a source of inspiration to followers. But at the same time, I also recognize that, you know, we are duty bound as leaders to make sure that we use our voice and speak our truth, and hopefully speak truth to, you know, areas of society that need, you know, spotlights shone on them. So I really think that we have a duty to use our social media to lift people.
And Bradwin, what would be your advice to future leaders? How should they go about, what are the skills they really need in this new world, in the post-COVID world, to succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I read an article the other day that was titled "Leadership as the Legitimization of Doubt." And why I think that is such a powerful article is, you know, gone are the days where leaders were designed to be these omnipotent know-it-alls that who had all the right answers. I think the more impactful leaders are the types of people that ask the right questions to the right people. So leaders need to be able to recognize their own humility, to be able to, you know, create spaces for those that have the answers to be able to voice those answers, and ask the right questions in the right contexts. So I think this notion of an omnipotent leader that knows it all is very rapidly being shattered, and I'm very excited about that. So my number one advice is to constantly be in learning, to constantly ask questions, and to make sure that those that have the right answers have the opportunity and the platform to be able to voice them. And most importantly as well, those answers that you arrive at need to have a diverse perspective on them. You know, perspective from people from all walks of life, from different races, genders, sexual orientation, you know. So you know, there's so much power in leveraging diversity and getting different viewpoints towards arriving at a solution. And I think leaders are the types of people that create the spaces and safe spaces for those types of opinions to be shared, so that we can build on one another's knowledge and arrive at the right answers.
And Bradwin, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
You know, this is one of those things where it's borderline. It kind of it kind of goes against, you know, the principles that I have about humility. What I will say is, you know, I don't mince my words around being an avid feminist and making sure that female voices are heard and recognized as equal, if not better, thinkers. So again, you know, and I really don't want to take the credit, because Delikazi, who's my successor in Lesotho, duly earned her role. But, you know, it was a real privilege just working with her and seeing her thrive and shine, and stepping up. So, you know, she knows that I'm a phone call away and that I'll continue to be her mentor, her advisor, and a confidant. You know, there's so many things about banking and about the world that she has infinitely more knowledge than I would ever have on. So, you know, there's a symbiotic relationship that we have for one another. But I guess right now, you know, she comes to mind, and I'm just so excited. Like I said, you know, the single thing that I'm most excited about as my legacy in Lesotho is, you know, having worked with someone who is now the first Black female CEO of a bank in the kingdom, and one of the first across the continent, I would imagine. So that's really exciting for me.
And Bradwin, looking back over your career, can you maybe share who are the role models of leadership that you came across, either in person or through your leadership learning, that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
You know, I read quite a bit. So, you know, I really enjoy Stephen Covey as a virtual mentor, you know, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I think it is not, I guess the irony is that that's my dad's favorite book as well. You know, so I want to pivot back to, you know, my parents. My parents have been an incredible driving force in my life. As I said, you know, my mom was the head of human capital at global multinational companies. So, you know, she instilled in me a constant drive towards, you know, corporate and fulfilling one's destiny within a corporate world. And she herself, you know, broke so many different glass ceilings in her career. And then my dad, being the pioneer that he was in technology and IT, you know, also gave me this vision of hope for the future, you know, and taught me that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. So those are the two leaders that I you know, always pivot back to. My brother as well, in Seattle. You know, he's done so many amazing things, both at FNB in South Africa. He launched the very first banking app in South Africa many moons ago. Was the global product owner for Microsoft Teams in Seattle, and look at how Teams has blown up. Now works at a company in Seattle that was acquired by SAP called Qualtrics for billions of US dollars. You know, and their leaders look to his opinion, you know, in helping guide their future. So I need look no further than my own immediate family for sources of inspiration around leadership. And I think it's also important that I look to my family, you know, for you know, my sources of inspiration, because they also help keep me grounded, and they also are very quick to remind me, you know, who I am, where I grew up. Um, yeah, so those are the leaders that I look up to.
So, Bradwin, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I guess the number one thing is I'm on LinkedIn, Bradwin Roper. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter, Bradwin Roper. Those are the two main platforms that I use where I share my opinion. My Instagram is Bradwin Roper as well. If you want to find the more quirky side of me and, you know, just the more authentic side, you'll often see a few posts around my cooking and my baking abilities, which is another hobby of mine. So I guess those are the three main platforms that you can reach out to me and find me on.
And last but not least, Bradwin, is there one piece of advice that you would like to convey to future leaders that they should implement in their own leadership?
Again, for me, you know, the role of leaders is to create opportunities. The role of leaders is to create safe spaces for people to share their opinions. The role of leaders is not to have all of the answers. The role of leaders is to make sure that when we ask questions, that those that are most qualified to do so, and that doesn't necessarily mean the person with the most amount of degrees, you know, It could be the person that has the most amount of social context around the question that you're trying to answer. So I think the role of leaders is to look for such talent, to hone in on that talent, create the spaces for talent to thrive and to shine. So I guess that is my main role to leaders is how do we create safe spaces for everyone to be able to voice an opinion. And then, you know, Brene Brown as well is someone that I've come to enjoy in the past 3 years around embracing the power of vulnerability. You know, I think it's incredibly inspiring and hopeful for people to look up to leaders and recognize a portion of themselves in these leaders. Recognize that at the end of the day, we're all human beings, and it is our humanness that is what matters the most. So, you know, embracing one's true, authentic self, being vulnerable, creating spaces for safe conversations and for talent to thrive and shine, and being purposeful about grooming talent, I think is another important factor that, you know, a modern leader needs to embrace. So those are my thoughts on leadership.
Well, Bradwin, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us that authenticity and vulnerability and our common humanity are keys to building a better future.
Thank you, Doctor.